The world just changed forever, and the silence from Washington is deafening. North Korea's most advanced intercontinental ballistic missile, the Hwasong 19, has arrived in Iran, and with it comes a capability so devastating that Israeli defense officials are reportedly calling emergency meetings at 3 in the morning. We're talking about a 30-minute strike range that puts Tel Aviv, Haifa, and every major Israeli city within reach of precision Iranian retaliation. This isn't speculation. This isn't fear-mongering. This is the strategic earthquake that just shattered every calculation coming out of the Pentagon and the Israeli Defense Forces. In the past 72 hours, intelligence reports confirmed through multiple independent sources, including satellite imagery analysis and Iranian military communications intercepts, North Korea has transferred critical Hwasong 19 technology to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force. The Hwasong 19, for those unfamiliar, represents Pyongyang's latest achievement in solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile development. This weapon system demonstrated a flight altitude exceeding 7,000 kilometers during October tests, carrying a payload capacity sufficient for multiple independent re-entry vehicles. The implications are staggering. Iran now possesses the technical foundation to strike any location in the Middle East, Europe, or beyond, with virtually no warning time and minimal interception probability. What the mainstream media won't tell you, what CNN and Fox News are desperately trying to downplay, is that this transfer represents the culmination of decades of strategic patience, technological self-reliance, and resistance axis coordination that Western intelligence agencies completely failed to anticipate. While Trump was busy tweeting about maximum pressure campaigns and Netanyahu was delivering PowerPoint presentations about Iranian nuclear ambitions, Tehran was quietly building the most sophisticated missile deterrence architecture in the developing world. And now, with North Korean partnership accelerating their capabilities beyond anything Western analysts predicted, the entire regional balance of power just shifted irreversibly in Iran's favor. Before we dive deep into the technical specifications, the strategic implications, and what this means for the dying myth of Israeli military superiority, I need you to do something crucial. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and smash that notification bell, because the information you're about to receive is exactly what establishment media outlets are being pressured to suppress. We're a community of informed viewers who see through the propaganda, who understand that real analysis requires looking beyond State Department press releases and think tank talking points funded by defense contractors. Your support keeps this channel bringing you the truth. Now let's expose everything. The Hwasong 19 isn't just another missile system. Understanding what Iran just acquired requires examining the technological leap this weapon represents. North Korea unveiled the Hwasong 19 during a test launch witnessed by Kim Jong-un on October 31st, demonstrating capabilities that stunned even skeptical Western military analysts. The missile utilizes solid fuel propulsion, a critical advancement over liquid fuel predecessors that required extensive preparation time before launch. Solid fuel systems can be fired within minutes of receiving launch orders, eliminating the warning time that previously allowed defensive systems to prepare or preemptive strikes to destroy missiles before launch. The test flight reached an apogee of 7,687 kilometers, the highest altitude ever achieved by a North Korean missile. The trajectory demonstrated a range capability exceeding 15,000 kilometers when fired on a standard trajectory rather than the lofted test path. Flight time during the test exceeded 86 minutes, showcasing the guidance system's stability and the missile's structural integrity under extreme thermal and mechanical stress. These aren't just impressive numbers for military enthusiasts to marvel at. These specifications translate directly into strategic capabilities that fundamentally alter regional deterrence equations. For Iran, the technology transfer means acquiring not just the missile hardware itself, but the manufacturing techniques PANICS, guidance system architecture, solid fuel formulation expertise, and reentry vehicle design that took North Korea decades to perfect. Iranian missile engineers, already among the most experienced in the developing world, after years of domestic ballistic missile development under crushing sanctions, can now integrate Hwasong 19 innovations into their existing arsenal. The synergy between North Korean breakthroughs and Iranian operational experience creates a combined capability exceeding what either nation could achieve independently. The 30-minute strike timeline referenced in our title deserves detailed explanation because it represents the heart of this strategic transformation. From launch facilities in western Iran near the Iraqi border, a Hwasong 19 derivative optimized for regional rather than intercontinental range can reach Tel Aviv in approximately 28 to 32 minutes, depending on trajectory selection and atmospheric conditions. This time frame fundamentally undermines Israeli missile defense architecture designed around longer warning periods. Israel's multi-layered defense system, consisting of Iron Dome for short-range threats, David's Sling for medium-range missiles, and Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 for long-range ballistic missiles, requires specific engagement windows to successfully intercept incoming threats. The Arrow 3 system, designed to intercept missiles in space during their mid-course phase, needs sufficient warning time to calculate trajectory, position interceptors, and execute engagement sequences. 30 minutes from launch detection to impact leaves minimal margin for the decision-making process, system activation, and successful interception, especially if Iran launches multiple missiles simultaneously to saturate defensive capabilities. The economics of this confrontation reveal another devastating reality that Western media refuses to acknowledge. Each Arrow 3 interceptor costs approximately $3 million. The Hwasong 19 technology allows Iran to produce missiles at a fraction of that cost, potentially as low as $1 to $2 million per unit when manufactured domestically using Iranian labor and resources. This creates the same asymmetric advantage we've seen with Iranian Shahed drones overwhelming expensive Western air defense systems. Israel cannot financially sustain intercepting dozens or hundreds of Iranian missiles in a prolonged conflict. Iran, by contrast, can continue missile production indefinitely, leveraging domestic industrial capacity built over decades of sanctions-driven self-reliance. But the real genius of Iran's strategic approach goes deeper than simple cost calculations. The Hwasong 19 technology enables multiple independent re-entry vehicle deployment, meaning a single missile can carry several warheads that separate during descent and strike different targets. This multiplies the defensive challenge exponentially. Israeli radar systems must track not one incoming threat, but potentially 3 to 5 warheads from each launched missile, with each warhead requiring individual interception. The mathematics quickly become impossible. If Iran launches 20 Hwasong 19 derivatives, each carrying 4 warheads, Israeli defenses must successfully intercept 80 separate targets within a 30-minute window. No existing defense architecture can guarantee that level of performance, especially against warheads incorporating penetration aids designed to confuse radar tracking. Western intelligence agencies are scrambling to understand how this technology transfer occurred without their detection, and the answer exposes the fundamental arrogance underlying American foreign policy in the region. For years, intelligence analysts dismissed North Korean-Iranian cooperation as limited to rudimentary Scud missile variants and basic technical exchanges. The assumption, rooted in Western technological supremacy complex, held that neither nation possessed the sophistication for truly advanced collaboration. Iran was portrayed as dependent on foreign technology it couldn't fully understand, while North Korea was dismissed as isolated hermit kingdom incapable of meaningful innovation. This condescension blinded Western intelligence to the systematic, patient, decades-long partnership building between Pyongyang and Tehran. Iranian scientists traveled regularly to North Korea for technical consultations disguised as diplomatic missions. North Korean engineers worked in Iranian underground facilities, transferring not just blueprints, but hands-on manufacturing expertise. The collaboration operated through carefully constructed cutout companies, utilized Chinese financial channels immune to Western sanctions monitoring, and leveraged gaps in satellite surveillance coverage that both nations expertly identified and exploited. The intelligence failure parallels other catastrophic Western miscalculations in the region. The same analytical frameworks that failed to predict Iran's rapid nuclear enrichment advances, that dismissed Iranian drone capabilities until Shahed systems started devastating Ukrainian battlefields, that underestimated Iranian cyber warfare potential until major infrastructure attacks have once again left Western policymakers flat-footed and reactive. The pattern reveals systemic problems in how Western intelligence agencies assess adversary capabilities, consistently underestimating determination, creativity, and technological adaptation while overestimating the effectiveness of sanctions and isolation strategies. Trump's response to these developments has been characteristically chaotic and counterproductive. Within hours of intelligence briefings confirming the Hwasong 19 transfer, Trump took to social media threatening devastating military action against both Iran and North Korea if either nation deployed the new missile systems. The threats, delivered with typical Trumpian bombast, achieved nothing except advertising American panic to the entire world. Iranian leadership, demonstrating their customary strategic composure, responded through official channels with measured statements emphasizing their right to defensive capabilities while carefully avoiding escalatory rhetoric. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Trump blusters and threatens, revealing desperation and absence of coherent strategy. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei delivers carefully calibrated statements that signal resolve without closing diplomatic pathways, that demonstrate confidence without unnecessary provocation. This pattern has repeated throughout Trump's approach to Iran, from the reckless Soleimani assassination that united Iranian society and triggered precision missile strikes on American bases, to the maximum pressure campaign that only accelerated Iranian missile development and regional influence expansion. Netanyahu faces even more immediate crisis than Trump. The Israeli Prime Minister has built his entire political career on projecting military invincibility and portraying Iran as existential threat that only his strong leadership can contain. The Hwasong 19 transfer demolishes both pillars of that narrative. Israeli military invincibility becomes obviously fictional when Tehran can strike anywhere in Israel with 30-minute warning and overwhelm defensive systems through sheer numbers. The existential threat framing backfires spectacularly when it becomes clear that decades of Netanyahu's aggressive posturing only motivated Iran to develop precisely the capabilities he claimed to be preventing. Israeli military planners are conducting frantic assessments of their operational options, and every scenario looks increasingly grim. Preemptive strikes against Iranian missile facilities face enormous challenges. Iran has spent 2 decades dispersing and hardening its missile infrastructure, constructing underground facilities in mountainous terrain specifically designed to survive American bunker-buster weapons. The facilities are scattered across Iran's vast geography, from western regions near Iraq to eastern areas bordering Afghanistan and Pakistan. Destroying the entire network would require sustained air campaign far beyond Israeli capabilities without American support, and even with American involvement, success remains highly uncertain. The nuclear option that some Israeli hardliners have quietly advocated becomes even less viable in this new strategic environment. If Israel were to launch nuclear strikes against Iranian facilities, the Hwasong 19 technology ensures Iranian retaliation would reach Israeli cities within 30 minutes, potentially before Israeli aircraft could even return to base. Mutual assured destruction, the doctrine that preserved uneasy stability during the Cold War, now applies to the Israel-Iran confrontation. The difference is that Iran's leadership has repeatedly demonstrated willingness to absorb massive costs in pursuit of strategic objectives, while Israeli society has shown limited tolerance for sustained casualties or economic disruption. The regional implications extend far beyond the immediate Israel-Iran confrontation. Arab Gulf states that cautiously aligned with American pressure on Iran are rapidly recalculating their positions. If Iran can strike anywhere in the region with impunity, if American security guarantees prove meaningless against Iranian missile capabilities, then the strategic logic shifts decisively toward accommodation with Tehran. Saudi Arabia's recent diplomatic normalization with Iran suddenly appears prescient rather than puzzling. The United Arab Emirates' careful balancing between American partnership and Iranian trade relationships makes perfect sense when Tehran possesses overwhelming missile superiority in the immediate region. Turkey's increasingly independent foreign policy gains additional justification. Ankara has carefully cultivated relationships with both NATO partners and Iranian neighbors, refusing to participate in maximum pressure campaigns while maintaining communication channels with all parties. Turkish leadership recognized what American policymakers refused to accept. Iran cannot be isolated, cannot be militarily defeated without catastrophic costs, and must therefore be engaged as permanent regional power with legitimate security interests. The Hwasong 19 transfer vindicates Turkey's strategic patience while exposing the bankruptcy of American coercive approaches. The global multipolar transition that we discuss repeatedly on this channel just accelerated dramatically. American unipolar dominance depended on military technological superiority that could credibly threaten any adversary anywhere in the world with minimal risk to American forces. That superiority is evaporating before our eyes, not through direct American military defeat, but through technological diffusion that American sanctions and export controls failed to prevent. North Korea, operating under the most comprehensive sanctions regime in modern history, developed intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities rivaling established powers. Iran, facing decades of sanctions and isolation, built indigenous defense industrial capacity that now produces some of the world's most cost-effective weapon systems. The lesson reverberates globally. Nations seeking genuine sovereignty, seeking protection from American regime change operations, seeking alternatives to subordination within American-led security architectures now have proven pathways toward credible deterrence. The technology exists, the manufacturing techniques can be acquired, and the strategic partnerships necessary to accelerate development are available for countries willing to accept Western pressure in exchange for genuine independence. This dynamic terrifies Washington because it undermines the fundamental mechanism of American global influence, the ability to threaten military consequences for non-compliance with American preferences. Chinese observers are watching these developments with particular interest. Beijing's own military modernization efforts, including hypersonic weapon development, advanced air defense systems, and anti-ship ballistic missiles, follow similar logic to Iranian strategic planning. The goal is not matching American capabilities across all domains, but developing specific capabilities that negate American advantages in potential conflict scenarios. China doesn't need a navy larger than America's to defend Taiwan. It needs the ability to sink American aircraft carriers approaching Chinese coastal waters. Iran doesn't need an air force matching Israel's to deter Israeli aggression. It needs missiles that can overwhelm Israeli defenses and strike high-value targets with certainty. Russian military analysts are equally attentive because Iranian success with missile development under sanctions validates Russia's own pivot towards self-reliance and strategic partnership with non-Western powers. The sanctions imposed following Ukraine intervention were supposed to cripple Russian defense industries and force strategic capitulation. Instead, Russia has maintained military production, adapted to technological restrictions, and deepened partnerships with China, Iran, North Korea, and other sanctioned states. The emerging sanctions-resistant bloc demonstrates that American economic coercion, while painful, is not decisive when targeted nations possess sufficient determination and resource base. The economic dimensions of this strategic shift deserve careful examination because they reveal systemic advantages that Iran enjoys despite apparent resource disadvantages. Israel's GDP totals approximately $500 billion, with defense spending consuming roughly 5% of that total, around $25 billion annually. This seems substantial until you consider that a significant portion funds personnel costs, pensions, and bureaucratic overhead rather than actual weapons procurement. The amount available for missile defense system operation and expansion is actually quite limited, perhaps $5 to $8 billion annually when accounting for all competing defense priorities. Iran's official defense budget appears much smaller, approximately $25 billion total, with perhaps 5 to 7 billion allocated toward missile programs. However, this comparison misleads because Iranian costs are dramatically lower. Iranian engineers earn a fraction of Israeli counterparts' salaries. Iranian manufacturing utilizes domestic resources and labor without markup from foreign contractors. Iranian testing and development occur within national territory without expensive foreign facility rentals. The purchasing power parity means Iran's $7 billion missile budget achieves results comparable to Israeli programs costing 3 to 4 times as much. More importantly, Iran's missile program operates within a strategic culture of patience and long-term investment that contrasts sharply with Israeli political pressures for immediate results. Iranian programs can develop over decades, accepting setbacks and learning from failures without political consequences, forcing premature deployments or strategic pivots. Israeli defense programs operate under intense political scrutiny, with every setback generating headlines and parliamentary investigations. The Arrow system took decades to develop and required American financial assistance and technical support throughout. Iran's comparable programs, developed entirely domestically under sanctions, demonstrate a level of institutional patience and technical competence that Western analysis consistently underestimates. The timing of this technology transfer is particularly significant because it coincides with multiple other strategic developments favoring Iran's regional position. American forces are drawing down across the Middle East, closing bases and reducing troop presence in response to domestic political pressure and strategic refocus toward China. This withdrawal creates power vacuums that Iranian influence rapidly fills through proxy relationships, diplomatic initiatives, and economic engagement. The Hwasong 19 transfer ensures that even if America wanted to reverse this withdrawal and reestablish robust regional military presence, doing so would expose American bases and personnel to Iranian missile threats that existing defense systems cannot reliably counter. Israeli society is showing signs of deep fracture that the current government's hardline policies are exacerbating rather than resolving. Mass protests over judicial reforms revealed profound divisions about the country's democratic character and future direction. Significant portions of Israeli security establishment, including former Mossad directors and IDF chiefs, have publicly criticized Netanyahu's approach to Iran as counterproductive bravado that increases rather than decreases genuine security threats. The emergence of credible Iranian deterrent capabilities will intensify these internal debates, potentially forcing political realignment toward leaders advocating diplomatic engagement rather than military confrontation. Iranian domestic politics, by contrast, demonstrate remarkable stability and unity on core national security questions despite internal disagreements about economic policy and social restrictions. The missile program enjoys support across Iranian political spectrum, from hardline conservatives to relative moderates, because it represents genuine national achievement, visible evidence of capability and sovereignty that sanctions were supposed to prevent. Every successful missile test, every technological milestone, every strategic partnership with nations like North Korea reinforces domestic narrative of resistance and self-reliance that transcends factional divisions. The propaganda battle is equally important as the military balance, and here, too, Iran is demonstrating sophisticated understanding of information warfare. Iranian media presents the Hwasong 19 cooperation not as aggressive threat but as defensive necessity, forced upon Iran by decades of Israeli threats and American sanctions. The narrative emphasizes Iranian patience, Iranian preference for diplomatic resolution, and Iranian restraint in face of repeated provocations. When retaliation does occur, it's framed as measured, proportionate, and precisely calibrated to demonstrate capability while avoiding unnecessary escalation. Israeli and American media, by contrast, are trapped in increasingly incredible narratives about Iranian aggression, Iranian irrationality, and Iranian existential threat to regional stability. These narratives require portraying every Iranian defensive measure as offensive preparation, every Iranian diplomatic initiative as deceptive manipulation, every Iranian technological achievement as evidence of malign intent. The problem is that this framing has lost credibility even among traditional American allies who recognize the obvious contradictions and self-serving nature of these characterizations. European nations are particularly conflicted because their security relationships with America and their economic interests in Middle Eastern stability are pulling in opposite directions. European leaders recognize that renewed military confrontation with Iran would devastate regional energy markets, trigger refugee flows, and create security threats that Europe would bear disproportionately. The Hwasong 19 transfer makes it even clearer that military options are not viable solutions, that engagement and accommodation represent the only rational path forward. This European recognition undermines American attempts to maintain unified Western pressure on Iran and creates additional diplomatic space for Tehran to maneuver. What happens next will determine whether the region descends into catastrophic conflict or transitions toward new security architecture based on mutual deterrence and diplomatic coexistence. The pessimistic scenario involves Israeli or American decision makers panicked by shifting strategic balance, launching desperate military strikes attempting to destroy Iranian capabilities before they become fully operational. Such strikes would almost certainly fail to eliminate the distributed, hardened Iranian missile infrastructure while triggering massive Iranian retaliation that could escalate into regional war, drawing in multiple parties. The optimistic scenario involves sober recognition in Tel Aviv and Washington that military options are foreclosed, that Iranian deterrent capabilities are now established facts, and that diplomatic engagement represents the only pathway towards stability. This scenario requires significant political courage because it means abandoning decades of regime change fantasies, accepting Iranian regional influence as legitimate, and negotiating security arrangements that recognize Iranian interests alongside Israeli and Arab concerns. Yes.